Man, the first time I sat down and really learned about the very first Muslim woman, I wasn't expecting to feel what I felt. I thought I was just reading some history, something old, something distant. But the more I went into it, the more I realized I wasn't reading about some myth or some figure carved into a stone wall. I was reading about a woman who walked this earth just like we do, felt pain just like we do, had dreams and fears just like anybody sitting at home watching this right now. And yet somehow she carried a strength I've never seen before in any story, any culture, any era. Her name was Khadijah. And Lord have mercy, when I tell you that woman was something special, I mean it in a way that don't even need exaggeration. See, you got to understand, when Islam first started, there wasn't no army behind it. There wasn't no giant building, no crowd chanting somebody's name, no big movement. It was just one man receiving a message in a cave, shaking, terrified, unsure what just happened to him. And the first person he ran to wasn't a warrior, wasn't a chief, wasn't a scholar. It was his wife. Let that sink in for a second. This man, who would later become the most influential human being in history, ran home scared, trembling, needing comfort, and who steadied him? A woman, but not just any woman, a woman with a heart strong enough to hold the prophet together in his moment of fear. And that right there, that grabbed me, because I don't care how strong a man is, every man got somebody he runs to when the world gets heavy. And for Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that person was Khadijah. She didn't question him. She didn't mock him. She didn't doubt him. She wrapped him up, calmed him down, and reminded him who he was. You know how rare that is? To have someone who believes in you even when you can't believe in yourself. That kind of loyalty, that kind of love, that's the stuff that carries a man through his darkest nights. But what got me even more was learning who she was before all this. This woman was already a powerhouse. She was respected, wealthy, independent, successful at a time when society didn't even give women basic rights. She ran a business when most men couldn't run their own homes. She hired people, managed caravans, made deals, earned her reputation, and she wasn't loud about it either. She wasn't arrogant. She wasn't pushing her status in people's faces. She was dignified. She was graceful. She was generous. People trusted her because she carried herself with purity and wisdom. And it blew my mind to think about that. Because here's a woman who had everything the world could offer: money, respect, status, and she still found her greatest honor not in what she owned, but in who she supported. She didn't marry the prophet because he was famous, because at that time he wasn't. She didn't marry him because he had wealth, because at that time he didn't. She married him because of his character. She saw goodness in him when nobody else was paying attention. She saw honesty in him before the whole world knew his name. That right there tells you she didn't just look with her eyes, she looked with her heart. And when that first revelation came, when he came home saying he didn't know if he was losing his mind, you know what she did? She didn't panic. She didn't pull away. She didn't say, boy, you need rest. She stood tall. She reminded him he was honest, he was kind, he was trustworthy, that God would never mislead someone like him. And it was her reassurance, her steady, calm belief that gave him strength at the most fragile moment of his life. That is why she wasn't just the first Muslim woman, she was the first Muslim, period. The first person to say, I believe in this message, a woman, and I'm telling you, that says something powerful about how Islam began, not on battlefields, not in palaces, but in the heart of a woman who believed in truth before she ever saw the result. And the more I learned about her, the more it hit me how deeply she shaped the early days of Islam. She didn't just offer emotional support, she offered everything she had. Her home became the safe place where the first Muslims gathered. Her wealth funded the movement. Her comfort protected the prophet when enemies were rising. She stood beside him when he had nobody but God and her. And even after she passed away, he never forgot her, never replaced her memory, never let anybody disrespect her name. This man, who later married other women for different reasons of community and responsibility, never once let anyone take her place in his heart. He would talk about her with tears in his eyes. He would send gifts to her friends. He would smell something she used to wear and pause. That's love on a level most people will never know. And I sat there reading this thinking, man, we really don't talk about her enough. You hear people discuss prophets, leaders, miracles, but the backbone of this whole story, the first believer, the one who held the message when it was still fragile, was a woman whose strength didn't roar, it whispered. And sometimes whispered strength is the strongest kind. And the thing I respect the most is that she wasn't out here trying to be known. She didn't chase recognition. She didn't demand attention. She didn't need the world to celebrate her. She just did what was right because her heart was clean. And to me, that's the kind of goodness that defines real greatness. The kind where you hold people up quietly, faithfully, without needing applause. The kind of goodness that don't fade when things get hard. And learning her story made me realize something about Islam I never fully understood, that women were honored from day one. That the very first Muslim, the first believer, the first supporter, the first protector of the message was a woman. If that don't tell you something about how God sees women, I don't know what will. The more I dug into this story, the more I realized Khadijah wasn't just a supportive wife. She was the kind of human being that changes the whole direction of a man's life without ever raising her voice. And you got to understand, in that society back then, women weren't given the space to stand out. They weren't encouraged to be leaders, thinkers, business owners. But Khadijah, she stood out anyway. She was like one of those people God gives a certain light to, and no matter how dim the world tries to be, you still see them shining. And the kind of shine she had wasn't gold or jewelry or titles, it was character. It was heart. It was strength wrapped in gentleness. And one thing that struck me is how her relationship with the prophet started. It didn't start with her trying to impress him or him trying to impress her. It started with respect. See, she hired him before she ever married him. She saw how he handled business, honest, fair, respectful, and she trusted him with her wealth. Now that's something powerful. Trusting someone with your money, that's deeper than flowers and romantic talk. That's real faith in someone. And he proved himself every step of the way. Didn't cheat her, didn't lie, didn't cut corners. He brought back more profit than anybody she had ever hired. And people in that city talked about him like, this young man, he's different. He's not like the rest. And she heard all of that. And you know what's wild? He was younger than her. In a society where men were supposed to be the older, more established ones, she chose a man younger than herself because he was good. And he respected her, not for her wealth, not for her status, but for the purity of her heart, for the steadiness of her soul. He used to talk about her years later, saying nobody gave him what she gave him, support when nobody else believed in him, comfort when the world felt like it was falling apart. He could have married any woman after she died, but none of them could take her place. And that right there tells you the kind of woman she was. But the part that really got me, the part that made me sit back and breathe for a minute, was when the revelation came. Imagine this, a man comes running home shaken to his core. He saw something no human had ever seen. He heard a voice telling him he's chosen with a mission. And his heart is pounding. His mind is racing. He's sweating, trembling, scared. He's losing his sanity. And the first place he runs to is his wife. That's love. That's trust. That's home. There's folks married 20 years and they still don't have a safe place like that. And she didn't say, what are you talking about? She didn't question his mind. She didn't accuse him of imagining things. She wrapped him close, covered him up, held him the way a mother holds a frightened child, firm, calm, protective. And she said something so powerful, it still echoes today. She told him God would never disgrace him because he was honest, he fed the poor, he helped the oppressed, he kept family ties, he supported the weak. She reminded him of his goodness when he forgot his own light. And folks, that hit me deep. You ever have somebody remind you who you are when you feel like you're breaking? That's real love. That's real loyalty. That's real partnership. And she didn't just give him emotional support. She used her connections, her wealth, her influence to help him stand tall in front of the world. She funded the entire early mission. All the printing, the spreading, the gatherings we'd have today, she financed the equivalent of that back then. She fed believers. She sheltered them. She protected them when people mocked them, threatened them, attacked them, when the early Muslims were being boycotted, starved, blocked from trade, cut off from society. She stood right there with them. A wealthy woman choosing to live in hardship with her people instead of staying comfortable on the outside, that says everything. That's loyalty money can't buy. And there's something beautiful about the fact that God didn't make the first Muslim a king or a warrior or a scholar. He made it her, a woman, a believer whose heart recognized truth before anyone else did. And I thought to myself, man, what does that say about how God sees women, how Islam sees women, how important they are to this faith? And it opened my eyes to something powerful. Behind every moment of greatness in history, there's always somebody quietly holding up the walls. And Khadijah wasn't a side character. She was the first chapter, the root, the foundation, the anchor. And the more I learned her story, the more I understood that you can't talk about Islam or the Prophet or faith itself without honoring the first person who believed in it when it was just a whisper. And as Islam began to grow, even if slowly, the pressure from the outside world was brutal. You had people mocking the Prophet, calling him crazy, spreading rumors, plotting against him. And Khadijah stood beside him like a mountain. She wasn't out there yelling back at the haters. She wasn't trying to fight fire with fire. She just held her ground with this quiet, unshakable dignity that said truth doesn't need noise to win. And that touched me, because we live in a time where everybody thinks the loudest one wins. But Khadijah proved the strongest one is often the one who stays calm. And when the boycott came, that long period where the Muslims were starved out, cut off from trade, abandoned by society, she was already an older woman by then. But she still chose to go live in the rough valleys with the Muslims. She didn't say, I'm too tired, or I'm too old, or I'm too rich for this. She walked into that hardship with her people because her loyalty wasn't dependent on comfort. And some historians say that the hardship she endured there is what eventually weakened her health. She literally gave her life for something she believed in from the very first moment. And when she passed, man, the Prophet mourned her like a man who lost his heart. That year was even called the year of sorrow, because losing her and his uncle at the same time broke him in ways even the strongest man would struggle to handle. And it hit me so hard when I read how he didn't smile for days, how the house felt empty, how he kept revisiting memories of her. And even years later, whenever he talked about her, tears would fill his eyes. Now, you tell me, what does that say about the impact she had on him, on his mission, on Islam itself? A lot of people don't realize this, but the Prophet never forgot how she loved him when he had nothing. He used to say, she believed in me when the people rejected me. She trusted me when they called me a liar. She gave me her wealth when nobody else would give me anything. That kind of appreciation doesn't fade. That stays etched in a person's soul. And you can feel the sincerity in every word he ever spoke about her. And here's what really surprised me. Islam honors Khadijah so much that God himself sent her a message. Imagine being told that God sends you greetings of peace. What kind of woman do you have to be for that honor to reach your name? Even angels spoke about her with respect. And the Prophet says she was one of the 4 greatest women ever created, one of the best to ever walk this earth. When I read that, I had to lean back in my chair a little bit, because you realize this ain't just a historical figure. This is one of the pillars of faith. And the more I sat with her story, the more it opened up something inside me. Because in a world where people think power is loud, Khadijah showed that real power is steady. In a world where people chase status, she showed that true worth comes from character. In a world where people look for followers, she became the first follower of a message that would change humanity forever. And in a world where some folks misunderstand what Islam says about women, her story stands like a lighthouse, bright, unshakable, impossible to ignore. And after learning everything about her, I couldn't help but sit there thinking how many stories in this world we overlook, how many real heroes never get the spotlight. Khadijah wasn't loud, she wasn't dramatic, she wasn't chasing fame, she was just pure, steady, true. And somehow that made her stronger than everybody around her. She was the first to believe, the first to support, the first to sacrifice, and the first to stand with the message the world didn't understand yet. And because of her, a shaken man walked out of his fear and into his purpose. Because of her, the first spark of Islam never went out. And that kind of legacy, man, you can't measure it. You can only respect it. And the more you learn her story, the clearer it becomes. The strength behind the greatest message on earth started in the heart of a woman who simply believed.